Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Bass & Associates, First Data Resources, and by Nebraskans for Public Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and information program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. From the Fireside Lounge in the Milo Bale Student Center, here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Hello and welcome once again to Consider This, and welcome to the University of Nebraska at Omaha. This is always a fun time for me. It was, I believe, after the gubernatorial debates that were done here in the UNO Student Center maybe a year and a half ago that I was first able to interview you for this show. Ann Boyle, chairman of the Nebraska Democratic Party, her worthy adversary, Chuck Sigerson, who heads up the state GOP. You know, if you weren't on opposite ends of the field, I would almost say you're a touring show. Because, you know, where one is, the other is either there physically or calls in.
Yes.
So I welcome and thank you for coming. We've just finished a primary. If you were writing one sentence bulletin about how your party did in the primary and what their outlook is for this fall, what would it be? Just
one sentence?
Yeah, just kind of like a headline. Democrats
win.
Dull but effective.
What, the Republicans are dull but effective?
Well, the primary was.
Oh, that's true. It was not interesting. So I think that's the thing where you look at it and you go, Stenberg, expected him to win, of course, Ben Nelson, Shelley.
But it was an exciting primary, especially on the Republican Senate side. It was even exciting when it started with Bob Kerrey stepping down from the U.S. or saying he was going to retire from the Senate. So from that point of view, I think that there was a lot of interest as the primary season wore on.
It had these flurries of activity with the Kerry announcement, and you know, when is he going to announce this? And then the sort of the Ben Nelson thing. Then the flurry of Republicans that decided, well, gee, we'll get into that race now, which didn't really pay off for them. But there
was not a meltdown like a lot of people thought would happen. With a lot of candidates, there's really a lot of opportunity to attack your opponent. And on the Republican side, we're pretty benign.
But it was a weird deal. People pulling out, you thought, then not pulling out.
And
that's what the primary is for, though.
And Tom Osborne getting in. I mean, there were a lot of things that happened we just can't seem to forget as time passes.
Well, let's start at the top. I mean, our role in the presidential primary system is
what role?
Negligible. I don't know what you can say, next to none. But we did both the apparent nominees, the heirs to the nomination throne, won handily in Nebraska. George Bush had, 78%, Al Gore 70%. I mean, Bill Bradley pulled in about 25-ish, quarter of the votes. Nebraska, are we going to get these people into our state to come visit? Are we going to play a role? The questions about whether Chuck Hagel at least be a contender for the vice presidential nomination. What do you see as far as Nebraska? Are we just going to ignore that and go straight to the Senate race and do not pass go?
We have an interesting phenomenon in the state in that if a candidate for president wins, for example, if Al Gore would win one of the congressional seats, or not seats, but in that congressional seat, then he would get an electoral vote. And right now, that's not likely, but a recent poll the World Herald did shows that he is within 10 points in Lincoln, and about that in the 2nd District in Omaha. So that could become interesting depending on what happens throughout the rest of the season, probably up until early October.
And as a dreamer, the Republicans are going to get all 5 of the electoral votes, and it's not going to be close at all.
Not close at all?
George W. is going to get about 66% in the state of Nebraska, which is a landslide.
But why would Al win Nebraska?
Well, like I said, he has picked up some, since the last World Herald poll that was done, and I think we all look to them as a statewide paper that has credibility. So since the last poll, he has picked up against George Bush. And I am not somebody who just takes it for granted that something's going to happen. Who would have dreamt that our Senate race would be the way it was this past year? And things can change on a dime. Al Gore is kind of an interesting character in that most folks think he's rather boring. But when he got into the primaries, they saw a different Al Gore. And he always has said that Bill Bradley was a blessing in disguise to his campaign because it really made him come out and go for it. Right now the polls show that he is behind George Bush. I think that that man has more spunk than most folks know, and it's going to become something very interesting to watch, and I am not willing to write off Nebraska to 5 votes in for the Electoral College.
What relation has traditionally the presidential race had on the Senate race? And what, the fact that, getting out the vote for Gore and Ben Nelson, or Bush and Stenberg, and then you've got some congressional considerations in there. What effect will this particular presidential race have on the Senate race?
Of course, we believe that the huge margin that George W. Bush is going to win by in Nebraska is going to help Don Stenberg win the Senate seat. I believe with 66% on the presidential side, probably 75–80% on the Tom Osborne winning in the 3rd district, that bodes well for Don Stenberg. After all, we have 51% of the people are Republican in Nebraska and only 38 or 39% Democrats. So we have a big margin, 134,000 votes edge.
I wonder how they continue to play that card, and we're all going to get bored hearing that between now and November. But how do you explain the Bob Kerrys and the Jim Exons and the Ben Nelsons and the Frank Morrisons and the Ralph Brooks going way, way back? But in this state where there has, to my knowledge, I can't remember when we ever had a Nebraska or a Democratic majority in this state, but we have had a history of electing Democrats, and I think this beat of the drum that simply because there are more Republicans registered in the state of Nebraska, that Republicans must stay home, they've never done that. And I think it's rather an insult to the intellect of those people who have chosen to cross party lines and support independent thinkers.
Well, Ben took kind of a beating from Chuck Hagel, but Ben is not your typical Democrat in many ways. At least he's not a stereotypical Democrat. I don't know if it's fair to say he's not a typical Democrat.
A beating from Chuck Hagel, but for two things. One is, and the one that polling data showed after the election was that there was a theme, and it was a advertising theme, that if you can get both, you can get Chuck Hagel and keep Ben Nelson. People in Nebraska liked Ben Nelson, and when he left, his approval rating was at an all-time high. So that was part of it. The other one was something that they used. Ben Nelson said he would not.
The promise.
He promised he would not run for office during midterm. When he signed that pledge, he said he and no one else knew that Jim Exon, within a short period of time, was going to step down. So that was used in newspaper advertising and everything else. But I think the real reason is they thought that they could get 2 good people, can keep 2 good people, and so that's the way the vote went.
Now, Chuck is a very charismatic person, just personally, talking to him. Certainly he proved to be a terrific campaigner. He certainly, knew politics before he even stepped back into Nebraska from working with John McAllister and his other business interests. But Stenberg, who is certainly a good Republican, still, and I hate to say this because people say you don't judge people on their style, but how do you think his style will stand up next to Ben's?
Well, if you're trying to sell a candidate with charisma, there is no one like Bob Kerrey. He had the market on for a long time. Chuck Hagel, too, has a lot of charisma. But on the other hand, a lot of people look at whether you can get the job done, whether you're a hard worker, whether you believe in what you say, whether you do what you say. And I think Don Stenberg is going to be looked at as a workhorse, a person who's going to go to Washington, no nonsense, vote the way Nebraskans want him, and he'll do it every time. So I think there's going to be looking for a steady person.
I think you could just say the same about Ben Nelson. Hard worker, go to Washington, vote the way Nebraskans want him, and there you have it.
So your line is that the numbers of Republicans in this state will pretty much translate into
kind of the same
those
way
kind
that
of votes.
Chuck Hagel won in '96 and Mike Johans won in '98. I think the Republicans in the year 2000 will rally around our president, our congressional candidates, and our senatorial candidates.
So you're just saying why should Ben bother? Is it?
No, I'm not saying that because Ben is a formidable opponent. But on the other hand, he's running up against a Republican tide. And that tide is swung from the Democrats of the past to the Republicans of the present.
And Don Wesley, the mayor of Lincoln, who just won last
The
spring.
highest ranking Democrat in the state, by the way, except for Bob Kerrey. So congratulations.
Well, you said the tide.
Well-
Well, there's been an election since then, and that was the mayor's race in Lincoln. And Don Wesley, a Democrat, won that race. So its pendulum swings is a pretty short swing.
Well, let's talk about the tide. Many Democrats, though, feeling the last several years, being in the minority in the House and the Senate, and they had a president, and they didn't really come out that much on the short end in at least one of the halves of Congress. They're still within striking distance. I mean, is the tide really turned, or is it just looking to decide if it wants to move more one way or the other?
We'll see in 2000, because if the Republicans hold the House and the Senate, which we now believe they're going to do, we never questioned the Senate. We worried about the House a little bit. I think that's fine. If we have a Republican president, a Republican House and Senate, which would be the first time since before, I can't tell you, 50 years ago, that's going to be a Republican show. And Republicans will have to perform for the first time ever, or they'll lose it again. I think the people are willing to give the Republicans a chance because, they gave Bill Clinton a chance. He had Democrat control of the Senate and the House for the first 2 years of his presidency. He did not deliver on much of what he said, even though he had the majority, while the Republicans have never had that luxury. So it's our turn. If we don't deliver, we deserve what we get. But I think you're going to see George W. with the Republican Congress deliver exactly what the people want.
And you know what? We could discuss that. The fact that Bill Clinton had a Democratic Congress and when he was first elected, probably for quite some time. And I think there was more to that than just he had the control. Fact of the matter is, the Democrats did have control for a very long time, and the forces, the powers that be, when he was a new president, I really do believe worked against him. He was a new president who had to walk into the likes of the Senate Majority Leader and the House Majority Leader, and they weren't accustomed to having to deal with the president. And they probably caused more of his problems than the Republicans did.
And he maybe picked a few battles that probably didn't serve him real well.
But he is probably the most effective president we've ever had in bringing this country, economies around, working in programs that people like. So I would really believe that it probably wasn't healthy for us to have all three. And that may be unfortunate for the Republicans if that happens, but earlier you said I was a dreamer. You are a dreamer as well.
A lot of dreaming going on
see.
here.
I intend to be at the inaugural in January next year.
Well, okay.
Republican inaugural.
For Ben Nelson's,
No,
Ben
I don't
Nelson's
think
party.
So. I don't think so.
Let's talk just for a moment, and we can move to some of the other races, about the fact that our primary is fallen into the category of so what? What's the fuss as far as a presidential race is concerned? I mean, you can still run a good Senate race, you can still run good congressional primaries, but who's running for president isn't having a huge effect on turnout, just because of where we've stood. The Republicans are looking to find some way to move those small states up front. Is there ever going to be a solution to this, or are the big states then just going to have a super something earlier?
We'll always get a chance to have some of the lesser candidates come into Nebraska. Occasionally we get them, but it's really rare to have a major candidate spend the money to come in early, just because we have so few delegate votes at the national convention. After all, if you have a choice to go to California with 100 and some delegates and Nebraska with 30 and the Republican side, where are you going to spend your money? So I think that I've told my position on the RNC is no matter what we do, it's going to be very difficult to get the small states into play.
Well, and I would agree with that. And the other part of it is that right now Nebraska is a very predictable state. It's not in the win category for the Democrats. It is a solid win in the Republican category. So again, it's a state that you pretty much know where you are. But that reminds me of something. Have you heard from Rudy Giuliani? I know you invited him on June
I hope he's
19th.
still coming. I'm looking forward to it.
He's got his hands full right now on several levels. In fact, that's one of the things I was going to ask you, is Rudy still coming? But,
Well, and I wanted to know if when he comes, if I can pay for Don Stenberg's $25 ticket so I can take his picture with Rudy
You can
Giuliani.
certainly take a picture with me, for
No,
sure.
no, 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 with Don Stenberg.
Well, we'll see.
Well, will you ask him and ask him to let me know?
We'll just see.
Okay.
and let us all know. When
Well,
you
the good
find out.
news is when our candidate comes into town, you'll get a chance to talk to him. Not like the First Lady, who ducked the press, totally ducked the press, ducked the regular people, only hobnobbed with the rich, and then walked out of Nebraska with $100,000. Congratulations, but who saw her? Are the Democrats ashamed of her? I'm not sure.
I don't know. I just want Don's picture with Rudy Giuliani.
You have to admit, and I didn't want to get off on this for very long, but it did sort of put a bad taste. I don't know if it was the Republicans were able to spin it right, or it did put a little bit of a bad taste in people's mouth that there wasn't even a hello to the people of Nebraska.
Well, that was their decision, and she was here at the invitation of Vin Gupta, who is an Omaha businessman. The party was not really part of that.
It was a private.
Yes, and I don't
Party
know if
as
that
opposed
was.
to it.
I don't know if
Sorry.
if that was his decision or her decision, and it was originally supposed to be earlier. And at that time, I was helping them to some extent, but then they changed the date, and the very day that she
You
was
couldn't even
there,
go.
well, I was in Washington D.C. that day, so it just didn't happen to work out, or I would have been there anyway. But. That was their decision, and it was nothing that we could do about that. And as Chuck well knows, when you are dealing at that level, they tell you what they're going to do. You don't really get to tell them what they're going to do.
But you know, I take exception to that because in my 5 years as chairman, no one has come into this state who has not worked with the state party, including Bob Dole, who came in May of 1996 and wanted to do a very in and out, not talk to anyone. And I said, if you do that, we will not help you. And he changed his mind, said, okay, we're going to do a little bit longer, we'll talk to the press, we'll do all these things. I take great offense at politicians who do not have time to talk to the people.
Well, what are you saying? Are you saying that Nebraska Democrats?
I think they went around Ann, and that was too bad.
Well, that's not the case, because they did call me, but when they changed the date, I was no longer available to help them. And so that's the way it is, whether or not we can agree or agree to disagree on that.
Well, let's move back to the Don and Ben show
Sure.
for just a minute. What are the main issues going to be? Are they going to be the traditional abortion will be an issue, although they both are pretty much on the same side of that?
We'll take issue with that as time goes on.
Oh, you are. And what?
I'm going to take issue with everything, so just understand that.
Okay, of that list of issues of everything that you're going to take issue with, what do you both see as the defining issues of this particular campaign? Oh, you're not telling.
Well, you know, I think that the Democrats are plotting their strategy. I think we're plotting ours, and I don't think we're going to be out there giving where we're going in the next 2 or 3 months.
Well, I just thought you were going to spill your guts here.
No.
Foolish.
Right
But I
now,
will-
their strategy is that there are more Republicans than Democrats in the state, so please just vote for a Republican because he is a Republican, and that way we win. That's their math.
Well, if you can have the real thing, why not vote for the real thing?
I think this state, the people in this state, pride themselves on being independent thinkers. They don't like to be predictable. They don't like to be told that they must do something because of party, and I think they've proved that over and over again. And Bob Kerrey, like I said earlier, is a prime example of that. Jim Exon is an example of that. Ben Nelson is an example of that. And so you don't have to look too far back to find what people think of being told that they will vote party line, like it or not.
Well, one of the things interesting about the Democrats is that when you look at Bob Kerrey and Ben Nelson and Governor Morrison, and there's a pretty diverse group of Democrats, is that they never feel compelled to follow a party line, toe the party line all the time. Now, Republicans always feel compelled to, I think, stick to the book a little closer to the script.
Then why was Ben Nelson involved with the caucus? Clinton in 92, Clinton in 96, and Gore in year 2000, 1999. If he was so independent thinking, Why was he totally involved in those campaigns for president?
Well, he's already been publicly stated that he supported Al Gore because he was a tie-breaking vote on ethanol. And you've read that.
Yeah.
That's a big industry
That's
in
going
the
to be a
state.
tough sell.
Well, not for me, it's not.
Well, why did he support Dukakis? Did Dukakis vote in ethanol too? How
No,
about
wait,
Bill
when was
Clinton?
the last time you didn't support a Republican nominee?
Never. But I'm proud of it, and I say it out loud, and I'm partisan. And I do not try and hide it. I have no problem with anyone being partisan. What I have a problem with is someone who is partisan and pretends they're not.
Well, Jim Exon supported all the Democratic nominees as well, and he was elected over and over and over
well,
again. So
He didn't
what
have
I'm-
me as chairman here of the Republican Party, which is a little different right now.
Well, I'll tell you what, I will still buy that the people of this state are not going to walk lockstep and take dictation from the party when I think the people of this state really like to look at a candidate, they like to see their track record, and by the time we get done, we will be talking about Senator Nelson.
We'll see.
Oh, all right. Since you don't want to divulge the strategies of these two Senate candidates, can you at least give some insight into what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses? What are Don's strengths and what are his weaknesses at
Well,
this point in the campaign?
Yeah, certainly I'm not going to sit here and tell you Don's
You don't have
weaknesses.
to enumerate a lot, but are things that, as a
I'm
as
going
a
to let
thing-
them figure that out for
as
themselves.
a party chairman, that things that you would like to bolster or have him emphasize.
Well, without going into specific details, Don is a genuine conservative. He stands for what conservatives stand for, and this is a conservative state. We in Omaha sometimes forget that 2/3, about maybe 50% of the Republican vote exists in the 3rd district. And they are a little bit different in their thoughts than we are in the metropolitan area. The 3rd district is alive and well, very strong, very Republican, and very conservative. And I think you're going to see those Republicans turn out in a big mass of votes to vote for Don Stenberg.
So does that tell me that his strength is that he's a conservative's conservative, and
Sure.
that's the ticket this
Why
year?
not?
Okay.
Why not?
Just trying to kind of summarize here.
Well, if that's their strong suit, then that's a weak suit. Ben Nelson, we all know. He was a governor, he served well, he was elected twice. He is somebody who I think is, as I've said before, an independent thinker, somebody who is, does not just take being told what to do. He is cautious in that he will take an issue and he will examine it and then move thoughtfully forward. He is not somebody that is a knee-jerk response to party dictates.
Now, do you feel that that's the thing that he will continue to drive home during?
Well, I
during
think
the campaign?
he will, but I think people know that about him too. People have asked me, what does Ben Nelson have to do to be elected? And my answer is he just has to continue to be Ben.
How nasty is this campaign going to be?
I hope not too nasty. As long as we stick to the issues and it doesn't get personal, that's going to be okay. And I can tell you, it's not going to get personal from our side. Now, it's going to be tough because we're going to be talking about the issues. We're going to be talking about what Ben Nelson has and has not said in the past, what he has and has not done as a governor, and what he accomplished and what he didn't accomplish during his years in public service.
So you're saying it'll stick to the record?
Of course.
And you know, the good thing about this election this year, Carol, is that when Ben Nelson ran against Chuck Hagel, Chuck Hagel had no record, as you know, a voting record or an administrative record. Don Stenberg's been in office for quite some time. This is his 3rd term, even though he's for term limits. He decided to run for a 3rd term. So he does have a record. And so those will be open for full examination by both sides.
Well, Ben Nelson's record, so to speak, has already been aired in the person of Chuck Hagel, at least on a statewide basis, you know, a Senate campaign. You know, he finished out his governorship, but he basically, it was the same record more or less. Don's has never been really, he's never had a tough campaign for Attorney General. You know, just.
Well, we're going to find out all about it because the Democrats subpoenaed, or didn't subpoena, but requested every record for Don Stenberg back to 1992. So they're not right now poring over every single record that Don has ever kept in the last 8 years. So we expect to see something from the Democrats very shortly.
Well, wouldn't you expect that in as much as you've done that you would be doing the same thing to Ben Nelson?
Did we?
Did you what?
Did we request every single document?
I don't know if you requested it, but I've
Well.
already seen your little booklet that you sent
Well.
out.
Oh,
early
my,
on.
my. Okay, well, we're kind of getting a feel for what this campaign is going to be about. Let's talk about congressional campaigns. I think the Osborne thing, I kind of feel sorry for the Democrat, as I often have out in the 3rd District. And I know, you know, you're not going to, you support your Democrat, but that's almost a done deal.
You know, I'm not the kind of a Democratic chair or spokesperson that's going to deny the obvious. Tom Osborne is the toughest candidate of all in that district. And Raleigh Reynolds is a really nice man. I really think it probably inspires people that he had the tenacity to stay in the race after Tom Osborne announced that he was going to get out. And I've read his public comments, and I've spoken to him, and he really is somebody who has a mission. He realizes how difficult it is, but I do admire his willingness to stay in the race and give people a choice. Having said that, I've been called from media around the country about that race, and I've been very candid. I've said, because we all know Tom Osborne, he is somebody who all of us admire. We admire his the personal traits. I think he is somebody who demonstrates or behaves as most Nebraskans feel that we all behave. We work hard and we get the fruits of our labor.
Is he going to play possum, as often happens when you have a strong lead, or is he going to go out and debate his opponent?
You know, Tom really surprised a lot of people in the primary because everyone said, well, he can't lose. But Tom didn't feel that way. Tom went out, he campaigned, he was a trooper. He really did do a lot of campaigning. And, you know, John Gale was a wonderful person, Kathy Wilmot, very nice person. They just got chewed up in the Osborne machine. And that's all you
the
can
legacy
say.
continues.
You know, and it's interesting because he really, when you listen to his philosophy, he is more of a Democrat than a Republican.
Please.
Oh, I don't want to get into that, but I
Please.
do want to ask you quickly.
I don't
We don't
think
have
so.
much time
On
left.
education,
About-
and by the way, he is on guns and on the death penalty. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people from the 3rd District say, I cannot believe somebody who is against the death penalty is running for Congress in the 3rd District.
Well, let's talk. We have a half a minute. The Shelley Keel Lee Terry race.
Slam dunk, Lee Terry, no problem.
Slam dunk, Shelley Keel, no problem.
Do you think?
She has a really good shot at it. She is one of the best campaigners I've ever met.
Chance, no chance.
Really?
They'll really be there.
Okay, in 10 seconds, will there be any surprises, either on either side? What do you think will be the surprise of the campaign?
For Chuck, it's going to be Shelley Keel.
For her, Don Stenberg wins easily.
Boy, the time flies. Well, we'll have you back in the fall, and we'll see how the campaign strategy has unveiled itself. Thanks to Ann Boyle, as always, and Chuck Sigerson, and thank you for joining us on Consider This.
Consider This with Carol Schrader is made possible with support from Bass & Associates and First Data Resources.